Welcome to this bonus episode of Inspiring Discussions. I'm your host, Ashley Janae, and I just want to thank you all for tuning in because this is a cannot miss episode where I will discuss 9/11 and why you all should check out the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. So let's get into it. So, as we all know, September 11th, 2001 will always be a tragic day we will never forget, and a day that will always remain a very dark moment in America history. And at the time this happened, I had just made 8 years old a month prior, and I was getting ready for school, and I was in third grade. And I believe I started school at around 9 a.m. So I want to say I was getting ready for school at around 8 o'clock or 8:15. So after I got dressed, I remember going to my auntie's room, and she had the news on, and I saw smoke coming out of both of the towers. And it said live on the upper right side of the TV. Oh, I'm sorry, it said live on the upper left side of the TV. And at that time, I didn't know what was going on. So I just remember being confused the whole entire morning because I didn't understand at that time we were under attack by terrorists. So I still went to school that morning because I guess my mom didn't receive a phone call from my school about anything. So I guess at that time it was safe for me to go to school. But once I got to school, it just didn't seem like a regular school day because there were teachers that were very concerned, and I don't think we did any schoolwork either. But I do remember my mom picking me up early from school since she had left work early. And I think I had asked her, "What's going on? Why are you picking me up early?" And I think my mom said it's because it's a lot going on right now. And that was pretty much all I remember that day. But as I got older and I watched a lot of documentaries about it, I learned that we were definitely under attack that day by a group of terrorists. And I learned that they were trying to destroy the White House or the Capitol building after hijacking a plane that eventually crashed in Pennsylvania after the passengers were trying to fight against the terrorists to stop them from crashing the plane into either the White House or Capitol Hill. Or the Capitol building. And I learned that the youngest victim was 2 years old that perished in the attacks and etc. So it was definitely a tragedy. And 5 years later, after the attacks, they started working on the 9/11 memorial in the museum. And in 2011, the memorial was complete and it became open to the public. And then 2014, the museum was complete and it also became available to the public. And the One World Trade Center was also under construction in '06 and was complete and open to the public in 2014. And the observatory was complete in 2015. So this year marks 10 years that the museum and the One World Trade Center has been open to the public. But last month I did visit NYC and I did go to the memorial and the museum, and I must say it was very well put together, and you could tell that they had put so much effort in it as well. But what really hit me the most was seeing all of those names that was engraved on the fountains where the towers used to stand, and to know that it's about almost 3,000 names that's engraved, including the names of the people that perished in the Pentagon and United Flight 93 and all of the other planes that crashed to the Twin Towers. So seeing that made me realize how many lives were tragically lost and that you cannot take anything for granted. And it was also sad to see some of the women who were pregnant, names listed in the way they had them listed on the fountains. It just basically said the woman's name, and they also listed with her unborn child. So that was tragic to see, knowing that those babies would have been young adults today. But the way they did the fountains was very nice because the waterfalls did add some kind of peace to the area. So that was nice to see. And then that's when me and the rest of my relatives went inside the museum, and they do require everyone to go through metal detectors and to put their bags through the machine so they could keep the property and the people safe. So there are 2 floors to the museum, and the first floor just had a lot of artifacts, and they had the last column, which was part of the steel from the South Tower, that had the names of first responders written on it. And they also had pictures of the victims that were affected by the attacks, and they had hats and uniforms that belonged to the firefighters. And then they had the fire trucks and police cars that had got damaged that day too. And they also had the survivor stairs, which were the stairs that people in the building used to escape and etc. And the second floor was just basically had more artifacts. But what really made the museum interesting was having this section of the museum that showed you everything that happened that day. So when you first enter the room, they show a video clip of the first plane hitting the North Tower, and as you walk further into the room, you can hear all of the 911 phone calls that was being made that day. And they even show live news footage of the attacks and the reaction of the reporters. And there were also more artifacts that there, such as items people lost or used during the attacks. And one item that really caught my attention was a red bandana that was inside of a vault. And the bandana was used by this man named Wells Crowther, who was a stock trader who happened to be a volunteer firefighter at the time, to cover his mouth and nose to protect him from inhaling the smoke. And he had saved 18 people that was in the South Tower because he was working in that tower on the 104th floor. He had led people to a stairway to help escape out of the building. And he also helped the people that were wounded. He fought back flames with fire extinguishers. And he carried a lady on his shoulders down 17 flights of stairs, leading her to safety. And he made 3 trips to save as many people as possible until the building collapsed. And he basically passed away in that event too at just 24 years old to help others out, which made him a hero that day. And I must say, after reading his story, it was definitely touching and inspiring. And he was very courageous as well. And this just goes to show you that there are still some good people out here in the world, and Wells just happened to be one of the good people that day that did a heroic deed. And his story just represents bravery, courage, strength, and determination. And those were definitely 4 qualities that Wells exhibited on that day, becoming a hero to many. And there are books about him on Amazon that you could read yourself, or you could read to your kids, because there is a kids book about him that was written by his sister, Honor Crowther Fagan, and it was illustrated by his uncle, John M. Crowther. So I would definitely leave that info in the box. And in 2006, he was named an honorary New York City firefighter, and he has a race that's named after him at Boston College, which was the college that he attended, and that's held every October. And he also has a lacrosse humanitarian award for players in the league who has made a strong impact in the community, and many more. So, and he also played lacrosse at Boston College as well. So his legacy will forever live on, and I would never forget his story as well because of how powerful it was. And another fact that caught my attention was the type of medications and inhalers people had to use after being exposed and affected by the smoke and dust from the towers. And as years passed, I heard some stories about people getting sick, developing respiratory issues, or even dying from 9/11 related illnesses. And to know the amount of medications people had to take just to live somewhat of a normal life. And the last fact that caught my eye was the methods used by forensic scientists to identify the bodies of the victims that perished in the attacks. And it was stated that they used DNA, so they could take a sample from the victim and compare it to something that has the victim's DNA on it, whether it could be a toothbrush or a razor. And then they had another way that they could identify a person is by comparing their DNA to someone in their family, like their parents, children, and sometimes siblings. And also the rescue dogs, the search and rescue dogs, also played an important role of identifying those victims too. Because if it wasn't for those search and rescue dogs, I don't think a lot of people would have gotten recovered. And I think the last search and rescue dog of 9/11 had just passed away in 2016 at the age of 16 years old. So, it was sad to see that, but at least she served her purpose, and those other search and rescue dogs served their purpose too by helping out the forensic scientists with identifying some of the people. So that was definitely a learning experience for me, because that was my first question that always crossed my mind was, how were they able to identify the bodies of the victims that perished? But after reading about it, my question was finally answered. So overall, visiting the memorial and the museum was definitely a learning experience. And even though it's a tragic day to relive, but after seeing everything that I saw that day, it just put a lot into perspective. And it just taught me that you can't take life for granted. Show love to the people you care about and help out when needed. And the people that was affected by 9/11, they were just basically normal people just like us who had families, who woke up that morning, probably ate breakfast that morning, then got dressed and left home to go to work just to make a living like we do each and every day. And I'm sure they plan on going back home that day, later on that day to their families. And then the other victims that were on the planes, they were just trying to get to their destinations and handle their business so they could get on with their day. And the pilots and flight attendants were just doing their jobs too. So again, they could just make a living. And then for something tragic like that to happen, it's just heartbreaking. And I was watching some documentaries about United Flight 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania. And once the passengers knew that the plane was hijacked, and they had already had a feeling that they were not going to return home. So they just started calling their loved ones, letting them know the situation, telling them they loved them, and telling them their final goodbyes. So, that was beyond devastating, knowing that it was nothing they can do and nothing their families can do to get them off the plane. So 9/11 was definitely a sad and traumatic day for all Americans. And still to this day, a lot of people are still affected by the attacks. And I'm sure a lot of people still go to therapy to this day, especially to cope with losing a loved one that was involved and to cope with surviving the attacks. And my heart and prayers definitely goes out to all of the victims that perished and their families, and to the victims that survived the attacks, because I know for sure they would never be the same again after witnessing the attacks up close, as the planes hit the buildings, as the buildings came down, and the aftermath with the survivors being covered in dust and debris. So overall, I would definitely recommend you all just to please check out the memorial in the museum, because you are going to learn and see a lot there. And you can also schedule a tour of the museum where they would give you headphones to listen to the audio about each artifact, or you can have an actual person there to do a live tour with you, or you could just see it on your own. So you do have choices. But we basically did the one to where we just walked around and we just saw everything on our own. But the museum is very organized and was very well put together. And I also forgot to mention that around the memorial, there's a tree called the survivor tree that survived the attacks. But I heard once the tree was found under the rubble, it was badly burned and lifeless. But they decided to nurse it back to health at the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation in the Bronx. And once the tree was healthy again, they brought it to the memorial site, which was cool. And the tree basically represents resilience, survival, and rebirth, which makes the trees more special and significant. So I would definitely recommend visiting this place. And it's also a way to pay respect to those that lost their lives. And they do have a gift shop there where you can buy souvenirs and books that represent 9/11. And the funds do go towards a good cause as well. And I will leave all of that info about the memorial and the museum in the box as well. So rest in peace. Rest in peace to all of the 2,977 victims of 9/11. So that's going to do it for this bonus episode of Inspiring Discussions. I hope I was able to inspire you all to go and check out the 9/11 Museum and Memorial, because trust me, you would definitely learn a lot of things you didn't know. And please check out Inspiring Discussions episode 24. And if anyone is interested, I do have some merch on my website, and I will leave that info in the box as well. And again, my heart and prayers go out to all of the families of the victims and the survivors of 9/11. And again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Stay safe and God bless you all.